Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Green Team's OpEd and LTE workshop. Whether you're watching here live or from home, thank you for joining us today. And we hope that you'll get something out of this workshop and learn something new, whether you're an experienced writer of op-eds or letters to the editor, or this is your first time. Hopefully there's something here for you. So I'll start out with just briefly discussing the power of an opinion piece to really generate ideas and be a part of advocacy. And the ideal is that you have a perspective on something, on an issue. In this case, you probably have quite a few perspectives on environmental issues and policies, climate change, biodiversity, and a number of those topics perhaps. And you can share that through a media platform with a diverse group of people, some who might just randomly come across it one day in their as they're perusing the news, or others who might be specifically seeking it out, especially if you mention a corporation or a business or organization or individual by name in your piece. That's often a way to really target to a specific audience. And then after reaching a diversity of people, it'll generate new ideas and also new actions that can lead to a real domino effect, hopefully generating the kind of change that you want to see. And I come today, I'll share a bit of my own experience with this because I haven't written op-ed pieces or letters to editors for a long time. But last fall, I ended up getting a short piece placed in the Wall Street Journal, which just led to a real domino effect for me, leading to, subsequent media mentions and sort of culminating in a piece that I was interviewed in for the Rolling Stone, talking about how faith informs my climate advocacy and how faith and science have sort of been a journey in my personal life, which was a really incredible way to get a different perspective out there, to engage with audiences, and to ultimately participate in advocacy through this medium of writing. So it can be a really powerful tool when used strategically and by an army of people who are working on it. So it's important to know sort of the ground rules in this and examine the difference between different forms of writing. So there are op-eds and letters to the editors, or abbreviated here LTE. And they're sort of different forms of writing. Some publications accept one or the other, but a lot accept both. So it's important to know what you're writing before you get into it. And there's some important differences between them. So a letter to the editor is around 250 words, but could be more or less. You always want to make sure to check with your publication before getting started in the writing process, because you don't want to have to cut a 500-word piece into 250 words all of a sudden. An LTE is typically responding to another article published in the paper very recently, or to a recent current event or upcoming event or anniversary. So it's very like time sensitive and time relevant and shorter piece. And letters to the editors are highly read pages because they're digestible, they're short, they give a good read on what the community is thinking. And they're also easier to get published than an op-ed is, so that's important to consider in terms of how much time you have to put into the pitching process and the editing process on your piece. Op-eds, on the other hand, are a longer piece. Again, you want to check with your publication before getting started, your target publication, or maybe your target set of publications. Op-eds center around a new, interesting, or unexpected topic as you want to engage the reader's attention and really get something going with your piece, get generating thoughts. And then the important thing that distinguishes an op-ed from a letter to the editor as well is that an op-ed usually has a bit of a longer time frame. So it will be relevant for a couple of weeks, if not more, as opposed to maybe being relevant that week because there was a publication you're responding to that came out in that week's paper, or there's a specific event that happened that you're responding to. Not to say that there's not some flexibility in this, but these are sort of the general trends. Um, and op-eds tend to be more challenging to get published. A huge part of the op-ed writing process is getting rejected, putting in pitches at a couple different places. That's also why the time frame is important, because you want to pitch to one publication at a time, but you might have to go to a couple before you get accepted, or you might have to go through a couple different pieces before you get accepted. So there's certainly the challenge of that integrated into this kind of writing. There's no guarantee that you'll get published, but there's a lot of incredible opportunities if you do. And all this information is coming from a good friend, Kyle, at the Evangelical Environmental Network, who's been doing this kind of writing for probably a decade or more very successfully. So he knows what he's talking about when he distinguishes between these. So we'll jump right in terms of how to get started on these different mediums. So how do you write a letter to the editor? The important thing is to have your topic, first of all, and that you're responding to something directly. So whether that's yesterday's opinion page, or an event that happened in town yesterday, or a national event from yesterday, you're usually responding to something specific. And then, of course, with that, you want to be timely. If you're responding to a piece that was published in the paper, you don't want that piece to be from a year ago, unless it was just such a momentous piece that people would remember it and still be talking about it a year later. You want to keep it timely, maybe within 2 to 3 days even of that page's publication, or within 2 to 3 days of the event of interest. You want to, of course, look up and follow the paper's directions. Almost anywhere that would accept a letter to the editor would have some kind of article that would also explain what is required, or what goes into the writing a letter to the editor. So you can just quickly look that up and follow the directions. And if you have a specific expertise, you want to share that up front when you're writing. So if you're writing, for example, about solar energy, and you work at a solar panel company, you want to be sure to establish that early on so people know, oh, this is why they're interested, and this is why I should listen to them, because they have a type of expertise that's beyond my own, so I can learn something from them. You want to refer to the legislator or corporation that you're trying to influence by name if your piece is directed that way. This might not be relevant to all, but let's say you're trying to get a company to adopt renewable energy. You would want to put their actual name in the piece, because when someone from that company goes, I don't know, a media relations manager goes and looks into the news, they're going to look up their name. And if you get your piece published with their name in it, they're going to see exactly what you wrote and probably report that to people higher up in the company who are the decision makers. And that's how you can really get the ball moving on action. You want to write the letter in your own words from personal experience and the way you see the world. You want to refute or advocate, and make sure to make a call to action. So make sure that there's a synthesis and a thesis to what you're saying, and a call to action to drive that letter forward. Keep it short and focused as well. And then include your contact information when you send in the letter to the editor, so people know how to reach you. The editors know how to reach you if they indeed want to go forward with publishing it. For an op-ed, there's a lot of those same principles still apply, but here is a structure from Kyle at EEN again that can help to write an op-ed, which is a longer piece needs a little bit more structural integrity, perhaps. So you want to start with a lead, which is a media term for an intention grabbing opening. Then you'll want to have your thesis somewhere in there up front so that people can follow your argument through the rest of your piece. And then you're going to provide that evidence. And there's no set number of pieces of evidence you want to provide, but a commonly used number in writing is 3. So point 1, point 2, point 3, but of course that's variable. You'll want to have evidence probably linked into citations if you're using those. And you'll want to make sure to use a counter argument as well to establish your credibility with the reader when you're writing a piece and show that you are aware of other perspectives, other opinions, you've considered them thoughtfully, and yet still you hold to your position and you have a refute to that counter argument. And then you can conclude your piece, often by circling back to the lead, trying to tie the piece together, front and ending, and conclude it off with hopefully a strong ending statement or call to action there at the end. So this slide is titled Leads on the Lead, because sometimes the hardest part of writing a piece like this is finding out, what's the spark to start it off. So a couple different things that could be useful when creating this lead are recent news, especially if you're doing a letter to the editor. This is super important to be looking through, deciding what do you want to respond to or what do you want to advocate for, what's going on right now. You could tell a dramatic anecdote from your own experience or something you've heard. You can reference something going on in pop culture that might catch people's eye, get their attention. You can turn controversial wisdom on end. So this is kind of making a bold claim right from the start that might cause people to wonder, where are they going with that argument, or where is that coming from? And then oftentimes you'll explain it and it'll become more reasonable, yeah, that's right, become more reasonable to people as they continue reading. But you can start off with that like kind of head scratcher statement. You can use an anniversary or a holiday or season to sort of start yourself off. So if it's Earth Day, that's a great opportunity to write something about the environment or climate action. You can cite a major new study if there's new research that's come out that people haven't been talking about enough. You think you can bring that up, or you can get personal and share something that strikes you from your own life. If it's a personal, vulnerable, or genuine story, people really like that, and that's an attention getter as well. So now we'll take a break from sort of the practical knowledge of writing and pitching and getting these sorts of things published to talk about Clean Car Standards, which is a advocacy initiative of Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light right now in collaboration with a number of other organizations nationally. And the Clean Car Standards movement is really about restoring national standards and revising them beyond levels set in the Obama-Biden administration, establishing a 2030 standard for cars and trucks that improves greenhouse gas emissions and reduces them to 60% or more below today's average. And it also will put the nation on a trajectory to make all new cars and light duty trucks zero emission vehicles no later than 2035. That's really big. And then ensure that all new trucks and buses are zero emission no later than 2040, which is going to impact the entire transportation sector and public transportation as well. And so this initiative is something that you might want to consider if there's not already a topic floating around in your mind for what you might want to write about. Clean Car Standards could be a great way to get involved in the advocacy, to call something out and advocate for it from an environmental standpoint or a faith standpoint or a personal standpoint or community or whatnot. And maybe with enough of us taking this action and getting the word out there through the pen, it can start the ball rolling towards this kind of legislation. But I also want to give an opportunity to workshop a diversity of ideas. So maybe the clean car standards really strikes you as exciting, or you're not quite sure what else to write about and you want to get on board on that project. That's wonderful. Please join us. And maybe if you're listening in, you're listening to this specifically because you've been asked to write something about clean car standards. So please join us in that initiative. But in addition, you might be from a green team and you might want to write about what your green team is hoping to do, what they've accomplished, and how they've gotten it done. This could be a great idea to spread the word about what you're doing as a faith community in your city or town, and get other people thinking about, you know, if they're part of a faith community, how they could get involved or how they could start something. Or if they're not part of a faith community, to perhaps think differently about what kind of impact faith communities are having and how they feel about the environment and climate, etc. Could be a really great way to shed light on this kind of work of green teams in Indiana. You could respond to climate events in your community. If there's, for example, some extreme weather right now, so many parts of the country are having extreme heat, facing extreme heat. That's an opportunity to respond and say, you know, this is really connected to climate change, and here are the ways that we can work to make sure that this isn't the standard for the future, or that this doesn't get even worse in the future. There's also upcoming environmental holidays. I really like this way of approaching things, so I'm going to show it right now because there are so many, and I was not aware of so many of these. So if we look, I mean, we've passed all of these days. World Hippopotamus Day, I'm sad that I missed that one, but we're here at the end of June, entering July. So we have, you know, National Clean Beaches Week. You could write about Indiana doesn't have a ton of beaches, but you could write about Lake Michigan, or a local beach in your community if there's a lake or something of the sort. World Nature Conservation Day on July 28th could be sort of a great blanket for a lot of different issues to write about. Honeybee Day, if anyone's involved in conservation of the bees or biodiversity work, that could be a great lead to start with. And for clean car standards, this is a little bit perhaps far down the road, but International Day of Clean Air would be a great opportunity to write about the impact of transportation on health of our environments and pollution and clean air. So those are all great opportunities, and it's helpful to look those up because, you know, it's hard to follow all of those events as they come. So at this time, I would invite you, if you're listening from home, to take a break and think about what kinds of topics you might want to engage if you don't have ideas already. You can pause the video, take a break, and then resume, and we'll get back to some practical information about one more slide. But we will carry on here and talk about pitching your piece, because this is sort of the last step after drafting a beautiful, well-crafted piece of writing. You want to ultimately get it published. So a big step is to choose your outlet, and I'll encourage you to do this before you start writing, because of course you're going to want to check in on those submission guidelines, the word count. If there's any formatting that you need, you want to decide if you're doing a letter to the editor or an op-ed. So you're kind of going to want to map that out beforehand. But in choosing your outlet, you can always choose your local paper. You can, for maybe your town or your county, or a larger city, or you can go for a national paper as well, or even broader, depending on what the scope of your writing is. If you're writing about a local event or a local initiative, probably going to want to pitch to the local publication as well. But there's this really great resource called the OpEd project, and they've sort of compiled a ton of information about submission that can help you work through it more quickly or decide where you want to go. So I'll go to Indianapolis because that might be a publication relevant to some of you. And you can click on the publication you're interested in, and it'll tell you the information that's relevant. You might want to give it a look on your own as well, but you can see op-eds for the Indianapolis Star are 800 words. Preference for local writers, which is great for a group of Indiana climate advocates. It'll also tell you how long it'll take editors to respond to you, which is helpful to know how long to wait around until you reach out to another publication. It'll give you the email, hopefully, that you can send this to. And then here it also shares information about a letter to the editor, and gives a word count and information on that. So it looks like for a letter to the editor, you go actually directly to the Indianapolis Star website and complete the form there. So that can just be used as a helpful tool or resource to make the process of finding a publication a little bit easier. But if you're looking at a local paper, you probably just want to look it up directly and see what their guidelines are. And then when you're drafting a pitch, which will often be in an email, you're going to want to answer the questions, why me? So how did you get into this? What are you writing about? Why are you qualified to write about it? So it might be good to share that you're involved in a green team of Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light, which is an interfaith environmental organization, and that's why you have this particular opinion or you want to share about this initiative. Why now? Why is this relevant, especially if you're responding to something? Why is this critical in the moment? And then, so what? What could this lead to? Why should people care? What's that call to action that you're calling for? And you're going to want to pitch short and sweet, a short little email that sums that information up. Make sure that your thesis is up front. There's not a lot of filler in that. And then just go ahead and copy and paste directly into the email your op-ed or your letter to the editor. It's usually easier for editors to read it that way, unless there's a specific guideline on the website that says otherwise. That's sort of the general recommendation, is to paste it directly into the body of the email. And then this isn't on there, but be sure to include your contact information. That's something I've forgotten to do before. Obviously, they can email you back, but they might want to reach out via phone. They also might want your address to know if you're a local resident, local writer, as opposed to someone writing from somewhere else in the country. And they might privilege your piece if you are writing from a local area. So that's sort of the pitching process. A lot of times these editors get many pieces, and it's important, especially in larger publications, to be following up, but with any. Don't be shy about sending a follow-up email saying, hey, I sent you a piece a couple of days back, just curious what your thoughts are. You can always say, if you're not interested in publishing, I'd like to pitch it elsewhere, so just let me know as soon as you're able to. And you can follow up 2 to 3 times probably, and then after 3, you might want to give up and move somewhere else, as to not burn a bridge with that editor by sending too many emails. But follow-up is usually always welcome. So thank you so much for coming to this workshop, whether as it happened or watching later on YouTube. I hope that this has been helpful, and please feel free to reach out to folks at Hoosier Interfaith Power and Light if you have any further questions, or if you want to workshop a piece, have someone take a look at it, get a second pair of eyes and an opinion on that. We're more than happy to help in terms of the editing process and finding the right publication or anything that goes into the process. So thank you, and hope to hear from you soon, and certainly hope to see some of those publications out there.